What's happening, everybody? It's your boy Jose, aka TheNYCGeek, aka TNG, aka your Elden Lord. Your Elden Lord. Don't forget that. Don't forget it. AKA the guy like many around the world who's just been consumed by Elden Ring. It's just my life now. I've come to accept that. At the time of this recording, I'm on Journey 3 with my main character. I'm about to finish Journey 1 with my secondary character, and I've kerplunked around 210 hours into this game. It's a lot. It's a lot. But I can't stop. I can't. I just can't. I'm not gonna. Never. And like so many, I can't stop talking about it. It's such a great game. It really is. But I have noticed something on YouTube. There are admittedly a lot of videos talking about Elden Ring, a lot of would-be guides and tips. And many of these tips are fantastic, especially considering how many new Souls players there are that are trying Elden Ring. So there are a lot of good tips. The usual tips are like, stay below 70% equipment, to not fat roll, two-hand your weapon to do more damage, glowing eyes on an enemy mean more runes. And those are useful tips. Those are very important tips, great to build a foundation on, and certainly something that I encourage beginner players to get a grasp on. But that's not going to be enough in Elden Ring, especially once you start getting into the harder dungeons, especially once you start getting into the harder difficulties after beating the game, which some people don't know. Once you beat the game, it doesn't end there. Like, yeah, you get an ending and you could be like, okay, I'm done playing this game, but that's just Journey 1. You have the option to go into Journey 2 and so forth, and the enemies just get harder and harder and harder. So here are some tips that I recommend that I honestly don't see being mentioned, elsewhere. Maybe one or two of them, but I know for sure I don't see a lot of these other ones. So tip number 1, follow the rule of 2. Those of you who have watched me stream Elden Ring over on twitch.tv/TheNYCGeek, shameless plug time, should know what I'm talking about here. When I start getting into like a boss groove, you'll start hearing me narrate. I'll start like I'll start being like, okay, time to roll. Okay, here comes the swing. Okay, we're going to back up. Like you'll start hearing me that. That's when I start getting into boss groove mode. But more importantly, you start hearing me count. And one of the things I always say is don't go for 3 swings. Never go for 3 swings. I've found more often than not that the sweet spot when you like find a break in your enemy's pattern is to go land a strike. It's like maybe you get maximum 2 hits. For example, when you're facing Margit, the first boss, he does that. He has that like that move that's very telegraphed that he does when he pulls back his cane and he's going to launch forward. He's going to swipe at you. Then you're going to roll through that. He's going to swipe at you, and then he's going to follow up with another roundhouse swipe. Right there, you can hit him twice. Pop, pop. Hit him twice. Don't hit him more than that. You get greedy, he's going to punish you with a tail swipe or something else. Sometimes you only get 1 hit. But the point is, this tip is don't get greedy. Do not try to sneak in that last hit. For most of the bosses in this game, the rule of 2 is a good mentality to cement in your head. If you have to, honestly, count. Do it. Count as you're striking. Watch their patterns, learn which one are going to leave them open, and then do the 2 hits, back away to safety immediately. Especially because a lot of the bosses here, they're not that relentless. They kind of just start pacing around. Once you get those 2 hits and you back up, they kind of start taking your measure and they'll start walking around too. So if you have to, count 1, 2, back up. So that's my tip number 1. Tip number 2, learn when to start rolling forward. Believe me, this is hard for me to get into my head at times too. It's natural to always want to roll away from a big attack. The problem is that usually the big attacks in this game have shockwaves that ripple outward. Case in point, fucking Radigan. Those shockwaves will ripple out from the boss's weapon, and if you roll backwards, you're just rolling yourself into the AoE. So start learning very early on that a lot of the attacks in this game, it is best to roll forward into them. And not to mention, a lot of those attacks, if you roll forward, that's when you get your 1-2 hit back up. So, another case, another good example is Margit. You learn this early on with him. This is why he's actually, as a pain of the ass, he's a great boss to help newer Souls players or even older ones get back into the routine of it. When he jumps into the air and he slams down his hammer, or his cane in phase 1 or his hammer in phase 2, that lesson stays with you. Like, you want to roll forward to 1, avoid the shockwave damage, and 2, to be close enough to hit him when you get back up from the roll. And that lesson stays with you even when you fight the game's hardest boss, when you fight Millennia, the Blade of Mikela, when she does her waterfall dance and she's slashing like a maniac, you have to roll towards her to avoid the damage. If you try to roll away, you're dead. You're dead. So rolling forward is my tip number 2. Try to start getting that into your head. Tip number 3, and this I can already see, but tip number 3 is target lock. And I know, already you're saying to yourself, oh, I already know to lock onto enemies. That's not what I'm talking about, you Maidenless Tarnished. What I'm talking about is using target lock to find hidden enemies. It might be dark in a cave that you're about to go into. There might be imps hiding on walls in a catacomb. There might be those fucking creepy hand monsters that cling to the ceiling. I hate those fucking things. They're creepy. My point is, using target lock isn't just about getting a focus on an enemy. Some of the enemies you don't, honestly, some of the enemies you don't want to be locked on, to be honest. This tip is, because like dragons, for example, I like to just free cam it. This tip is more about the fact that you might reveal an enemy that is ready to whoop your ass when you see a suspiciously empty room and you lock on and bam, there's one skulking in the shadows. So tip number 3 is target lock. Use it to reveal, especially in dark places. Trust me. Tip number 4, it goes kind of hand in hand with the previous tip with locking on and all that. And that's bring a bow. Always bring a bow. I do not care what your build is. I don't fucking care if you're all strength. I don't. And unless you're a mage and you have access to glintstone pebble, and even still, I would suggest bringing a bow. You always want a ranged weapon to to help you separate the packs. You know, a lot of the groups in Elden Ring, you can actually pull single enemies out of them, especially fucking dog packs. Those are the worst. I hate the animals in Elden Ring. Honestly, I find the animals in Elden Ring worse than anything else. But you know, as long as you're pulling them from afar, this will help you significantly, you know, thinning out the would-be opponents, because you probably know by now, but fighting a group of enemies simultaneously, even just 1v2 can suck ass, especially if you're in tight quarters and the camera boss decides to rear his ugly head. Man, fuck the camera boss. So you don't want that. Bring a ranged weapon. And again, even as a caster, I'm a Moonveil Katana builder, so I even as a caster, I would still recommend it. Loretta's Great Bow is very expensive on focus points, and I wouldn't use it for pulling individual mobs out of a pack. I would use it if I was sniping mobs from afar, like the roaches in the whatever they're called, the Disciples of Rot. I call them the cockroaches, the ones that shoot the little spikes. Those guys, if you're shooting them when they're in the swamps, or if you're killing the ants in the Haligtree canopy, maybe, but preferably I would just use a bow if I'm pulling from a single pack, especially when you find like clustered enemies. So that is my tip number 4. Tip number 5, know when to run. And I don't mean just like run from a fight. I mean know when to run through an area and avoid all the trash mobs. I'm not telling you to become like a fucking speed runner or anything like that, but there are areas in this game that are built to infuriate you. They're designed to fucking grind you down, piss you the fuck off, and put you on tilt. And you don't want to be on tilt in this game. That's for goddamn sure. The bosses already will do that. You don't want to be on tilt from the area leading up to the boss. And I can think of 2 places immediately that have done that to me. The underground Siofra River, I hope I said that right. The underground Siofra River well area with the ancestral spirits who shoot the fucking spectral areas at you. Wow, that fucking place is hell. I fucking hate that place. And the Haligtree canopy. Those are the 2 spots off the top of my head I could think of that are just meant to piss you the fuck off. You just want to fucking break something. Those places suck. So, you know, instead of winding down your patience and your resources, maybe as you're learning the area, you do that. But once you start getting a hang of it, you know, don't get your fucking ass knocked off a branch like I did constantly on the Haligtree. Plot your route, book it. Obviously, you know, plot your route. You don't want to run into a dead end with a train of mobs up behind you. But if you already know what destination you're heading to, don't ever feel bad about just running through and avoiding a ton of those trash mobs. I've done it twice already at the Haligtree. Again, at the hallway chock full of sorcerers, in Raya Lucaria Academy, Thornville Castle, that spot where you fucking find the archers. Like you step out of the Grafted Scions room and the catapult guys are sitting there with the flamethrowers and there's a bunch of archers there. And just run through that shit. Don't fucking fight all that. That's just gonna wear you down. Tip number 6. Stealth. Holy shit that From Software improved the stealth mechanic. And you have Sekiro to thank for that, because Sekiro is very much focused around stealth and the parrying system. Crouch constantly. I'm telling you, crouch constantly. You can sneak up and backstab so many mobs. You can backstab mobs next to other mobs, and sometimes they just stand there like, whatever, I didn't like that guy anyway. Like, they'll just stand there like, well, okay, thanks for doing me a favor. Like, trust me, you could kick them, and sometimes you can even kick them off their doom with the animation. Like, they might be right next to a cliff, pick them up, pop them off right there, Sparta kick them. You can actually sometimes get them to lose sight on you if you break line of sight. They might lose aggro. Stealth is something I actually didn't realize works so well until I started being more focused on melee in my original character, and it's fantastic. I've rarely run into enemies having spider sense, meaning they'll just turn as you're about to reach their back. It's happened a few times, but nothing that would ever discourage me from attempting to sneak up and backstab on a regular basis. I really do recommend it. Tip number 7. This one you might have heard before, but I really don't see a lot of people mentioning it, but just in case, those creepy ass Grim Reaper statues. I had no fucking idea what those things were in the beginning of the game. I had no idea. None. I would just get the little message. I was like, all right, whatever, it's on my map. And eventually I noticed that they started like disappearing from my map the more that I explored catacombs. And with my smooth brain, I finally put 2 and 2 together, because that's what their purpose is. When you click on one of those Grim Reaper statues, you'll notice that they emit like a blue light, and on your map, it will point in a direction. That statue is telling you that not only is there a dungeon nearby, but it's giving you the direction it's in. Now, again, some of these dungeons are way off the beaten path. Like, the fucking Grim Reaper might be up here, but the fucking catacomb that it's pointing to is like at the bottom of the valley. So you got to go through some Carajo land place. But it's at least telling you there's a catacomb nearby that you haven't explored, which means more runes, more loot, more items. So that's what those Grim Reaper statues are. Again, it took me forever to figure it out. Tip number 8. Do not be afraid to upgrade your weapons or spirits. Do not. Trust me. Elden Ring has an abundance of upgrade materials. It's far more than some of the previous Stingy Soul entries. Like, they used to be titanite slabs and whatnot. It was like finding a fucking 4-leaf clover. Don't be afraid to experiment. See what weapon you might like. I just ran into that recently with my secondary character, that I was going more for like a bleed build. And I was like, you know what? I'm not digging this bleed build as much. And I started digging rapiers more. So I'm like, well, you know, all the investment I put on those smithing stones, that's not a bad thing. They're not going to go to waste. And again, there's so many upgrade materials that you find that doesn't matter. And later on, you're going to get them so many, especially if you start exploring dungeons. And then you can just buy them from the Twin Maiden Husk. If you find the right bell bearings, the Twin Maiden Husks are the merchants that are in the Round Table Hold. If you go inside, you go to the corridor to the left, you go past Sir Gideon's room, and you look to your right, those are the Twin Maiden Husks. And you give them bell bearings, and they can start selling you stuff. So don't sit on your upgrade stones. And don't, like I did, hoarding them like a fucking dragon on the majority of my first playthrough. And this also goes for your spirits. Do not forget to upgrade them. It makes a very, very big difference. And as a quick little bonus on top of tip number 8, I guess maybe you could call this tip number 8.5 or tip number 9. I don't know. For me, I'll give you a quick listing real quick of what I think are some of the best spirits. The best, I think, beginner spirits that you'll find are honestly the first 2 that you're given, the jellyfish and the wolves. The jellyfish gets surprisingly tanky the more you upgrade it, and the wolves are great for breaking an enemy's poise, plus you get 3 of them. The intermediate spirits that I would recommend are the puppets in Raya Lucaria Academy, and these, especially for your range purposes, and the skeletal militiaman ashes will carry you really far. The skeletal militiamen are really good. Those ashes you can get early in the game by beating the Tibia Mariner boss in Summon Water Village. And those bosses are super easy on horseback. They're a joke. And Summon Water, you can just follow the northeast route from, I believe, from Stormville Castle. It's in that direction. It's the way towards getting towards Caelid early on. And finally, my top 3 spirits in the game, and from number 3 are the Great Shield Soldier ashes that you find in Nokron, the Eternal City, after you beat Star Scourge Radahn. I ranked them number 3, as I said, and honestly, there are situations when I find them the best summon. I still use them for my fight against the final boss's first phase, Radigan. Shield Bros are the best all the time. They're fucking great. I love Shield Bros. So they will, you get, I would say that, like I said, they're kind of a later game spirit, but you can get them if you do Star Scourge Radahn right after Raya Lucaria. You can get them pretty early on, and you can start investing in them. Number 2 is Latena the Albinoric. I don't know how to fucking pronounce that word. You have to go through a small cave to find her, and you find her and once you can't, like, she's not initially friendly to you. You have to have the Haligtree secret medallion to get her. I would recommend looking at the wiki because there's a little, different locations for getting this spirit, or rather there's different locations that you need to traverse to before you can get this spirit. But she's incredible. She's fucking awesome. She doesn't move at all. Don't think of her like any other summon in the game. She is a turret. You place her down and she has super fucking long range. She hits from a mile away. I use her constantly for my big dragon battles. I use her for Dragon Lord. I used her, last night. I used her for Dragon Lord. I use her for Lich Dragon. Any of the other world dragons, I use Latena. I fucking place her down real far as soon as I get the little tombstone indicator on the left side of your screen, and then run up on the boss. Half the time, I would say the majority of the time, they don't even fucking aggro on her because she's hitting them from so far, and she's accurate. Her arrow shots are like, they just heat in. They're like almost like he's shooting arrows that look like almost like glintstone pebbles. So they track the enemy. And lastly, of course, even after the nerfs, and I put the nerfs in fucking air quotes, Mimic Tier is still the top tier summon. Still top tier summon. And you get that also in Nokron. I'm gonna tell you right now, whatever damage nerf they said they applied to Mimic Tier meant jack shit. Because Mimic Tier's strength was never its damage. It never was its damage. Absolutely not. It's the fact that it has an insanely high health pool and that it will replicate your weapon. If you have a Moonveil Katana, it's destroying your enemy's poise with you because it's spamming the L1 button. If you had a bleed weapon on it, it's stacking bleed with you. If you gave it a staff, it's casting spells with unlimited mana. The Mimic Tier is still fucking crazy. It is still top-notch summon. Don't listen to anyone telling you otherwise, that it was nerfed now or something. It's not. It's not. It's not. Not until they reduce its health pool or they maybe fix the, I don't know, availability of it fucking attacking with its with your replicated weapons. Anyway, those are my top tips for, Elden Ring. If you enjoy this kind of content, please consider hitting that subscribe button. Hit it now, unless you're subscribed. As always, please, then don't hit the button. Consider instead hitting that like button, hit the share button, leave me some comments. What do you think are some tips? And especially, I hope if these tips have helped you out, please let me know if they did help you out. And some other advanced tips that maybe if you're another, Souls vet or you're deep into Elden Ring that you could recommend to other new players. Thank you as always, guys. Your time is the most important thing that you can give me. Take care of yourselves. Take care of each other. Stay